What is up, Insaners, and welcome to another video of the Fantasy Premier League 2021-22. Today, guys, we'll be talking about the wildcard in Game Week 4, why and who should wildcard this week, what are the best case and worst case possibilities. We'll also talk about alternate options for using your wildcard and which one looks the best. At the end, guys, we'll see some drafts for Game Week 4 and do some tinkering. I'm sure you're excited, guys. If you like today's video, make sure you hit the like button. You can also consider subscribing if you're new around here. Come on, guys, let's hit that magical 1000 number very soon. Now we'll start with why you should wildcard in Game Week 4 and then move on. I genuinely think if you've had a bad start to the season, if you've picked some wrong players in your team, wildcard in Game Week 4 is definitely for you guys. Now the international break also allows you to assess different players. There might be some injured players in your team. You might have the likes of White, Weltman, or you might have Martinez, and those players might need replacing, guys. Plus, with the international break, some of the players are traveling and they will be playing, so they might also get injured, and that might change your overall strategy. Another very important reason to use the wildcard in Game Week 4, guys, is that it can help you change the team structure. Let's assume that you've gone with two strikers, maybe a 3-5-2 or a 4-4-2, or maybe you're playing with a 4-3-3 with three strikers up top, and you're not happy with your players. Let's say if you have about 6 to 7 players who you want to change, I think that is when you press that wildcard button. Another very important reason of using the wildcard in Game Week 4, guys, is that you might be able to catch the price changes. Now, during the early part of the season, there are a lot of price changes that happen, and you might want to catch them, because if you don't, you might not be able to afford those players, and then your overall strategy changes. With so many options available in FPL this season, guys, let's say premium midfielders or even premium forwards, you might want to catch them early and get them in your team before everybody does, and then the price rises happen. I think if you're more or less set with your team and you might just need a couple of transfers, I think the wildcard is not for you. And let's now talk about some of the disadvantages of using the wildcard now. The first very important point, guys, and I cannot stress how important this is that you only have a limited data set. Now, FPL as a game, if you're playing it very seriously, that involves a lot of data and analyzing the data in the right manner. Considering that we've only had 3 game weeks data, guys, it's very limited. I think it's a little difficult to understand what players are doing good, what players might be doing bad, or what teams might struggle, or they might do well. So keeping all of this in mind, I think it's important to have a little more data and then take informed decisions. The second point, and another very important point, guys, is that the fixture swings are not strong enough. So the teams that are having good fixtures right now are Wolves, Arsenal, and Watford, and the bad fixtures are generally for Aston Villa. Now we'll touch upon each team, starting with Wolves. I think they've done decently well. Their attacking numbers haven't really translated in a lot of goals, but I think their numbers still are pretty good to consider them in your team. Their defensive numbers are also pretty good and are better than the likes of Man United and Liverpool, who are pretty strong teams in my opinion. Now the question is, guys, can you really trust the Wolves team? I know there were a lot of options last season as well, but we generally didn't go there. Now this year around, we have the likes of Jimenez in attack who's returned, who's not scored a goal, and I'm pretty confident that he just needs that one goal, guys. Once he gets that goal, I think he's pretty good to go. You also have the likes of Trincao and Traore, guys, who've shown great attacking threat, but still they haven't got a single goal, and that is very important. Coming to the defense, and their fixtures are pretty good. The run that they have right now is calling for clean sheets, guys. So if you're looking for a cheaper defender or some cheap options, or probably if you can afford somebody like a Semedo who's probably around the 5 million mark, then you can still consider them. Overall, I still feel Wolves is not a team where we'll have a lot of players for them. Like, I really don't imagine people going for a triple up from Wolves, right? I'm sure most of us won't do that. Now coming to Arsenal, and Arsenal has really struggled, guys. They're bottom of the league right now. It's a tough time for the club. Some of us went with the likes of Ben White. Maybe some of us also went with Emil Smith-Rowe, the likes of Saka as well. But those players haven't really returned. And I think in spite of the run that they have, in spite of the run that Arsenal has right now, I think it's pretty difficult to go for those players. The other team that has a favourable run of fixtures, guys, is Watford. And Watford again is not really a top 6 kind of a team, right? You'll have certain players. You have the likes of Sarr, who is the front runner or who is the talisman for the team. But what other options can you really think about, right? You don't really have a lot of options who can play in your 11 week in, week out, and you might not want to consider different players from the team. Now, the last reason of not using the wildcard in this particular week, guys, is that if you have about 2 to 3 moves to make, or if you have about, let's say, 4 players at max who need replacing, I still think you can do that with a couple of transfers. Now, a lot of us did save a transfer in Game Week 2 when we carry forward a transfer. And if you are in that category, guys, you will have 2 free transfers this week as well. Now, if you also want to do a couple of more transfers, you can easily do that with a -4 or even a -8 at max. I really don't think -8 would be a situation in most cases, but a -4 is still okay to recover points. Guys, I think it's really important to save your wildcard for really dire situations. If you're feeling that your squad is in a really bad shape, most of the players are not performing, most of the players are injured, for example, then it's a completely different scenario. But in case if you only want to do a couple of transfers, guys, make sure you save that wildcard. I know the wildcard is not considered that important by a lot of players. I mean, it's an underrated sort of a chip, and a lot of players do this mistake of playing that wildcard very early when they don't really have to make a lot of transfers. Now, talking about some alternate plans for the wildcard, guys, Game Week 7 to 8 is another window where you can use your wildcard. Now, it's a very important window because a lot of people will be playing it in Game Week 7 or let's say Game Week 8. Now, the gap between Game Week 7 and Game Week 8, it's an international break, and a lot of people might want to use it probably in Game Week 8 so that they know if some players are injured or what kind of players to go for. As I said, guys, I think this will be a very popular move. I think a lot of people will be using their wildcards in this particular window. Now, there's certain reasons for it, right? The first one would be that you will have a larger data set. Now, in this case, you'll at least have 6 to 7 game weeks of data that is being played. You'll know a little better in terms of which players are doing well and which players can be sold and bought in your team. Plus, you also get the advantage of the international break in Game Week 8, and that is the time you can actually assess if certain players are affected by COVID, if certain players are injured, or if they are not playing in your team. The third reason is, guys, there are huge fixture swings. Now, the likes of Brighton, Everton, Leicester, Liverpool, and Man United all have a bad run of fixtures coming up, and you might want to replace a lot of these players from your team. In general, I feel you'll have some players from Brighton, at least Sanchez or maybe even a defender. You might have the likes of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, or might have an Everton defender, let's say like Luca Digne. Then you might have a Leicester defender, let's say Amati. Liverpool and Man United also is heavily owned by a lot of managers, right? Now, if you want to switch from these teams, there are some really good runs that are happening. There's some really good teams that are going on some pretty good runs, and you can catch hold of those teams. The likes of Chelsea, Man City, Leeds, and even Southampton, guys, they have great fixtures, and these teams have some decent options that you can go for, getting rid of your Liverpool and Man United players majorly. Now, Arsenal also has a decent amount of fixtures, but again, I think by that time we'll also get an understanding of how Arsenal's playing. I know the start has been pretty bad, but I'm sure, guys, they can still recover from their current position. Now, the final reason of using the wildcard in this particular 7 to 8 window is that you might have a better budget. Now, a lot of people don't understand this, but let's say whatever players you have in your team, and let's say you have the likes of Antonio, Benrahma, or some other players who are rising in value, who are rising in prices week on week, and multiple times in a game week, your squad value is increasing all the time, guys. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and they don't really give a lot of importance to this, but your squad value is really important when you're playing your wildcard. Now, how is that? I'll just tell you how this whole thing works. So let's say if your squad value was 100 million when you started the game, as in when you're progressing in the game, your squad value will increase. Now, what that means, every player will increase or decrease in value. Let's say if your delta, which is the increase in a player's value, is a lot more, you will be in the plus, and your squad value will be a lot more than 100. Now, when you're playing a wildcard, guys, this 100 is going to change to, let's say, 100.8 or 101 or 102 or whatever that value is, and you can actually use that value and buy the players. So if you're using a wildcard in Game Week 7 to 8, your squad value might be a lot higher than what it is in the current game week. Now, all is not rosy, guys. There are also a couple of downsides to playing the wildcard in Game Week 7 to 8. Now, what are those? Let's cover that. The first very important thing is that you'll be missing out on price changes and price rises specifically, guys. There might be a lot of players who you might not own, but you might want to have them in your team. And let's say if their price is increasing, right? You might have to afford them, or you might have to get them at a higher price as compared to, let's say, Game Week 4. So, for example, let's say Lukaku or maybe Cristiano Ronaldo is being transferred by a lot of people right now, right? That means that their price is generally going to get higher in the coming game weeks. It might be even higher. Let's say, for example, Ronaldo right now is 12.5 million. He might reach up to 13 million by game week 7 or 8, and that might cost you an extra 0.5 million. Now, if you're okay in terms of budget, then it's a different story. But guys, if you're very tight on budget and if you don't have a lot of money remaining in the bank, I think you're going to take a hit. Now, just adding to this point as well, as I mentioned, the likes of Lukaku, Cristiano Ronaldo getting higher in price, on all these different premium options, considering that there are a lot of options this year, you might find it difficult to buy them. Of course, you can't get all the premium options in your team. You'll have to pick and choose and you'll have to pay, let's say, 2 to 3 premium options for one particular week in your team. But then again, if their price is a lot higher, you might not be able to afford them. I think considering the pros and cons of this particular wildcard plan, guys, 7 to 8, I'm still favoring it a little bit because of the huge fixture swings, more data, as well as the international break is also coming up. So we might get more information, or we might be better prepared to make a wildcard change. Now, the last option of using the wildcard chip is in Game Week 13, guys. I know a lot of people haven't really thought about Game Week 13 right now, considering that we are sitting at Game Week 3, but that also can be an option. Now, how is that an option? I'll just tell you how. It's a huge differential because I think majority of the players would have played their wildcard chip by then, so you might be in a very advantageous position. The best part about this chip strategy, guys, is that you'll have a lot of data, you'll have a good understanding of what players to go for, what players to avoid, what teams to go for, what teams might struggle and might not give you points. Secondly, guys, you'll have a larger budget to play with. A lot of your players might increase in value, and that gives you a better financial outlay. Now, the downside of this strategy, guys, is that you'll miss a lot of fixture swings. If you're looking for budget options or cheaper options from, let's say, like a Southampton team, you might not be able to get them because then they have tough fixtures. Chelsea's another team who will be very, very hot at that time, especially likes of Lukaku, maybe even a Reece James, or maybe even a midfielder, right? You might want to hop on these midfielders or these players a lot early on, and using the wildcard in this particular week might not give you that opportunity. Of course, with playing this wildcard so late, you'll miss a lot of price changes. It might be very difficult to get certain players, guys, because their price might have increased by a lot. In general, I feel there are no big fixture swings available. You still have the likes of Leeds, Leicester, Liverpool and Tottenham who have decent fixtures, and Chelsea and West Ham would have tricky fixtures, so you might want to change these players if you already own them. I think overall, guys, it depends on your team. It's a very team dependent sort of a decision. If your team is in tatters, it's in really bad shape, you cannot go ahead with the game or in Game Week 4 without making a hell lot of changes, then I think use your wildcard in Game Week 4. Take that call. You don't have to be afraid in terms of that you're using your wildcard a lot earlier. A lot of players might use it later. Forget all of that. Just focus on your team. It's a very team dependent call. And if you feel it's the right time, go with your gut and go with the wildcard chip. On the other hand, guys, if you feel that you can do with a couple of transfers, maybe even take a hit at the worst, then do that. Don't use the wildcard right now and save it for later when your team might actually need it. Personally, I think I am focusing on the Game Week 7 to Game Week 8 window. I am personally looking at that time, and mostly I'll be using my wildcard at that time. Now we'll start with the wildcard drafts, guys, and the first draft that we have is a 3-4-3 draft. Now this draft, guys, has Ronaldo and Salah as 2 premiums, and Trent as well if you consider him a premium defender. In terms of a defense, we've gone for Trent, as I just mentioned. We've also gone for Diaz, who's certainly the most nailed Man City player, guys. I think he will start majority of the games. The Champions League games might be a little tricky to call because when those games happen, then it's a bit tricky to understand what Pep is going to play and what 11 he's going to start with. But I still feel Diaz is the most nailed on option. He's a great defender, and I think Man City is a solid defensive unit, so definitely have him in your team. And of course, when you've gone for 2 expensive defenders like Trent and Diaz, you might want to sacrifice a little bit in defense if you're really serious about getting those premium players in your team. As I mentioned, Wolves have a really good set of fixtures, guys. They can go on a good defensive run. Their defensive numbers are in fact pretty good. They've just not managed to get clean sheets or probably even score goals, which is the worst combination possible. But I still feel Wolves have clean sheets in them, guys. If you really want to go for the most nailed on options, guys, I think Semedo and Cody are the most nailed. A lot of people are talking about Marcel as a 4.5 budget enabler, but I'm not really sure whether he's really worth it or not. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad player or he might not get an attacking return. My only concern or worry is that he might not start all games. Yes, he's looked pretty attacking in the previous games and he was getting into good positions, but then 8 Nouri is also a decent replacement, guys, and you never know, he might take Marcel's position and then you might be left with a defender who's not even starting in your team. If you can afford it, then Semedo is definitely worth it. His attacking numbers and his overall numbers are not really worth talking about right now, but a lot can change with favorable fixtures coming in, guys. I think he's worth that extra 0.4, 0.5 million, whatever that value is. I think he's definitely worth it, and if you can afford him, definitely go with him. Size is also an option at 5 million, but I think I'll avoid size, though he still has good attacking threat, so if you want to target our attacking threat from set pieces and in terms of goals. He's also a decent option, but I think Semedo, with the position that he plays in, with the advancing runs that he'll make, and he's also playing a lot further forward, right? We'll have to remember this. He's playing a lot further forward than the likes of Saez, who's just dependent on set pieces for goals, right? So if you consider the overall package, I think Semedo is a lot better option if you want to target a Wolves defender. Now, first strategy here is to play with a 3-man back, and most of the times, players like Duffy and Livramento, who we've gone for as cheap enablers, they might not play most of the weeks. Having said that, I'm still not very averse against playing them in this team. Let's say if this is my team, this is my wildcard team, I can still play them for the easier fixtures, and these rotate pretty nicely. Now coming to the midfield, guys, this is where a lot of budget enablers and budget picks exist. Now you have the likes of Rafinha, who's pretty much nailed. I know game week 4 is a bit tricky with Liverpool, but he can score, he can do well against Liverpool. Leeds, I think as a unit, can do very well against Liverpool, as we've seen in the past. And I think this is still an okay fixture, but the fixtures after that are pretty great, guys, and he's probably a set and forget option for quite some time. In terms of some other picks, guys, we've gone for Ferran Torres, who had a brilliant game against Arsenal. Now, again, can we really say that he's nailed 100%? Is he going to start every game with the Pep Roulette coming in action and the Champions League games coming in play? I'm not really sure, but in a short term, guys, I think Torres is a pretty decent option to go for. I think he's that kind of an explosive pick who might give you a couple of points in a game week or two, but then he might just explode the scene. He might give you a 20-point haul or a 15-point haul. He definitely has that capability, guys. Plus, whatever we've seen so far, Gabriel Jesus is playing out wide, and that means that he has a little less competition in terms of playing up top. Of course, things can change when KDB returns. He can play as a false 9. The likes of Gundogan can play as a false 9 as well. We've seen all of that happening in the past, guys, but I think in the short term, he's a very good option to go for. Now, considering that you don't have a lot of value to invest in the other two players, we've gone for the budget Demarai Gray from Everton, guys, and the fifth midfielder is just like a 4.5 midfielder, where you can go for any player, to be very honest. Now, the reason I've gone for Demarai Gray here is that, guys, Everton have really good fixtures. I think if DCL is not injured, let's say if he's fit, and we'll talk about him when we talk about him as a pick, but in general, I feel Everton have really good fixtures. Demarai Gray has looked pretty attacking so far. He's got a couple of returns as well. He, along with Doucouré, guys, are taking a lot of advanced positions. They're playing a lot further forward than I think a lot of people expected. Demarai Gray as well, guys, has transitioned very well. I think he'll be a very cunning pick. He'll be a very great differential pick if you can get him in your team. Now, next is Sissoko from Watford, guys. As I said, you can easily go for a 4.5 midfielder here, guys. You can go for the likes of Gilmour. You can also go for some other player, because most weeks you won't be playing this player, as the formation that you're playing with is a 3-4-3. Now coming to a forward line, guys, and this is where a lot of money has been invested. Of course, you have the likes of Ronaldo, guys. I really don't have to say a lot about him as an FPL pick. We've seen his history. If you haven't, do check out his history. He's been absolutely monstrous in terms of FPL performance, guys. He's a great player. I know a lot of people are saying that he's turned 36 and he's old and he might not perform and all of that stuff. But leaving all bias aside, guys, I think he's still going to do pretty well. He's going to play up top for Man United and he's going to get the goals, guys. He's not very heavy in terms of creating chances and getting assists, but we all know that he's a goal machine and he will give you goals. The only worry for me, guys, is that is he going to start against Newcastle? Right now, there's a lot of speculation happening in the community and a lot of people are saying that even if he comes from the bench, even if, let's say, he gets the last 20 minutes or so, there's a good chance that he can score against a Newcastle team who struggled defensively. Now, that argument is absolutely true, guys. He can absolutely score against Newcastle and he can get points, but having a 12.5 million forward, a premium forward, and that player not starting the game week, I think it's a bit tricky, right? In general, I still feel he's going to be a great FPL option, and if you are afraid that you might not be able to afford him later when his price rises, I think it's an absolute no-brainer to go with him. Now, the other two options are also pretty good. We have the likes of Antonio, who's done very well so far. So if you got him in early from game week 1, like I did, I think you've done a great job. He's also risen a lot in price, so you're also adding in team value, and you can use that team value when you're making your changes later on. The last option is Calvert-Lewin, guys. If he's fit, I think he's a no-brainer. He's a pretty good option to go for. We know that Everton's attack mostly is focused on DCL and his aerial ability, guys. The Everton team will be feeding a lot of crosses, will be feeding a lot of balls to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and I think he's a decent finisher. I think he'll score some good points, and he can cover off a couple of your premium options with the fixtures that he's having. Now, if you want to do some changes and if you're not happy with a couple of players, Now you have 0.7 million remaining in this draft. You can easily go for somebody like a Luke Ayling if you're not really convinced from the Wolves defense. If you feel that they're not going to give you clean sheets, if you feel that Leeds has a better run of fixtures, Luke Ayling can be a great option, guys. He's also pretty budget, so you can easily afford him. Of course, he's a downgrade, so you'll have extra cash to play with there as well. Yes, their attacking potential is pretty good, but defensively, I'm not very convinced whether they'll be able to keep a lot of clean sheets this season as well. I still feel Luke Ayling, if he plays as a wingback or if he plays as a fullback, has great potential. There's a lot of attacking threat that he can offer in the Leeds attack, guys. And I said, the fixtures are pretty good, right? So you won't be really wrong to go with him. Now, when you do the Semedo to Ayling move, guys, there will be some cash that you free up, and then you can do the Torres to Jota move. Now, a lot of people might not know this or might be considering this move, but Firmino could be out for a few weeks. I'm not sure whether it's 3 to 4 months. Nothing official has probably come out till yet. At least till the time of recording this video, nothing official has come out. But in general, I feel he might miss a couple of game weeks, and that might give us an opportunity, guys, to use Jota in our teams. I know a lot of people already went with Jota and he's doing pretty well. Of course, he was benched against Chelsea, so that was a different case. But otherwise, he's done pretty okay. Now, a lot of people, especially like me and I think a lot of other managers as well, we have sold the likes of Tsimikas. Now, that frees up that important Liverpool space, guys. And this is the exact scenario, this is the exact situation why we made that transfer. Of course, Jota could always have had that possibility of playing in the team, and this injury to Firmino, guys, this definitely makes Jota a viable move. Now, another upgrade that you can do with some money remaining in your bank, guys, is you can transfer Gray to Sarr. Now, Sarr is also a great option from the Watford team. Again, whether you can really trust Watford to score a lot of goals week in, week out, I'm not really sure. But he's going to be the talisman, guys. He's going to be their main player. He's also on penalties as well, so that is a huge advantage. I think a lot of attacking points and a lot of attacking output is going to come from Sarr, and you can really go for him. Now, the third alternate, guys, is going without the likes of Ronaldo, and yes, without Ronaldo also you can make up a team. Now, if you feel that Ronaldo is probably overpriced, he's disturbing your overall balance of the team, you're not really sure how he's going to fit in terms of the United setup, you probably want to wait and watch. You're not sure whether he's going to start against Newcastle, right? These are a lot of questions, these are a lot of doubts that you might have. Now, there's an alternate strategy that you can use where you don't go for the likes of Ronaldo and you have the likes of Jimenez instead. Now, I'll kind of cover the entire structure a little bit. In this particular draft, of course, you don't have Ronaldo. You're going with two midfield premiums with Salah and Fernandes. When Ronaldo is not in your squad, I think it's pretty viable to kind of cover that risk or that move or that player with Bruno Fernandes, who, if he's on penalties or if he, let's say, still stays on, certain free kicks or maybe even penalties, could still be a decent option. Now, there's another argument to be made here, guys. We're forgetting that he can still score goals. He got a hat-trick this season already without scoring a penalty in that hat-trick, guys. 3 goals without a penalty. That shows that he can still score goals. Of course, his numbers are a bit skewed because of the penalties that he's taken. A lot of his goals have been penalties. There's no denying that. But I still think that he can be a decent option, and it's not very easy to just discount him that he's not an option anymore. Overall, I feel it's still something to think about, guys. You can't really rush and jump to a decision here. Now, of course, guys, when we don't have Ronaldo, we can easily keep Trent. We can also get in the likes of Shaw. Let's say if you're not really comfortable with Diaz, you feel that he might get rotated a lot. You might be worried about Man City having a couple of tricky fixtures in the coming weeks. You can go for Shaw. Might be a short-term move. You might keep him for 2 to 3 game weeks, and then you might transfer him out. I still feel that he can get attacking returns, guys. Yes, he's not really been that great so far. His numbers are still okay. They're not that bad, but they're not translated into any attacking returns yet. In attack, you can retain Antonio and Calvert-Lewin, and the third option that you can go for, guys, is a huge differential option, Jimenez. I still feel he can be a factor this season, guys. He can score a lot of goals. He can do well. Now, the fixtures are there to definitely prove that. But again, are you okay taking that risk? Are you okay taking that chance and, jump on him a little earlier than what everybody else is doing? That will be a differential strategy, guys. And if it comes off right, you'll have a massive rank gain. But as always, it's a calculated move. You have to kind of understand what are the risks involved, and you have to see whether whether you're able to take those risks, whether you can have the appetite to lose rank, for example, if the situation comes. Now, coming to a couple of alternate drafts here, guys, there's some more drafts that we can work upon. Now, if you're not comfortable going with 3 strikers, if you feel that you're investing a lot of value in 3 strikers up top, you can actually go for a 3-5-2 formation. Now, what happens in this formation, guys? You can easily go with 3 premiums with Salah, Fernandes, and Lukaku, for example. Now, of course, Lukaku can be changed to Ronaldo, and we'll kind of cover that in the upcoming drafts. But for now, I think 3 premiums, I feel it's a bit too much. If you look at the overall balance of the squad, right? You have the likes of Duffy, you have the likes of Livramento, you have the likes of Ailing as well, who's a 4.5 budget defender. But in general, I think most of the weeks with Luka Digne and Luke Shaw currently, I don't see that as a very strong combination, guys. I still feel the midfield is strong though. You have the likes of Rafinha, you have Salah, Fernandes, you have Jota, and you have Sarr. So these are 5 very strong midfield picks, guys, who you can easily play week in, week out. If you look at the attack, Antonio again is okay. Then you have the likes of Lukaku. I still feel, guys, overall the balance is missing a bit. I personally prefer Trent, and I feel that there's a huge upside, there's a huge advantage of having Trent in your team. I think considering that Liverpool can get clean sheets, guys, plus Trent can also get those attacking returns. Their fixtures are okay, and I think he can do pretty well. So I personally like the idea of having Trent in my team. And this particular version of a 3-5-2, right, where we don't have the likes of Ronaldo, we have the cheaper option in Lukaku. That doesn't allow us to go for somebody like a Trent because we don't have a lot of balance remaining. Now, of course, you can debate with me that Lukaku has a couple of tricky fixtures. This particular week, he's playing Aston Villa and he's a prime captaincy option, guys. And that is why I have gone for Lukaku in this particular version of the draft. Now, if you want to switch him and get the likes of Ronaldo, I think you can easily do that by shifting some funds in midfield or in defense. I think defense looks a bit tricky because we're already not invested a lot of money in defense. You will have to probably get some money out of midfield and then invest that additional 1 million or so with Ronaldo in attack. Now, apart from the no Trent factor, guys, a couple of more issues here is that Lucas Digne, yes, I'm at least hoping and expecting that, he'll come good or he'll do well. There's a lot of expectation that, his performances might get better and he might get, start getting more points, considering that he's been a bit unlucky in terms of FPL points. But still, he's not really scored much, right? And with Lucas Digne, I still feel I'm not very, very confident. I would probably be a lot more confident in terms of having a Shaw or probably having a Trent in my team or even a Diaz, right? I know these are slightly expensive. Shaw is almost the same price, but the likes of Diaz and Trent are a little expensive. But these players, I just somehow they give me more confidence in terms of FPL points. Another issue here is that this draft has no Wolves players, guys. And I think one of the primary reasons that you're using a wildcard this particular week, right? Of course, it probably is to bring the likes of Lukaku or, the likes of Ronaldo in your team. But when you have the opportunity, guys, you can easily have a couple of Wolves players, at least one, right? You can have that one Wolves player as a safety blanket in your defense, which will actually help you in getting maybe some clean sheets as well. So no Wolves players, I think it's a big miss here. Then Lukaku against Villa, as I said, it's not really a bad option. I think it's a pretty decent option. You might have to make a couple of transfers next week, let's say, if you really want to get Ronaldo. So that might mean a hit. So that is something that you have to consider while going for something like this in terms of a draft. Now, as I said, if you want to go for Ronaldo, you can go with Ronaldo. You don't really have to take out Antonio and take out money from there. You can, as the earlier draft said, you can easily go for a cheaper 4.5 million striker. I think you can go for any striker you want. Most of the times, these strikers won't play as you're playing a 3-5-2 formation, right? Now, in terms of the other premiums, guys, I think Salah and Fernandes can easily stay. So you don't really have to do a downgrade there. You can downgrade the likes of Jota. Now, if let's say Firmino's not out for long and he might return in a couple of weeks, then you can easily have someone like a Ferran Torres, who's a decent option in the short term. He's, I think he's 7 to 7.1, something around that range. So probably 0.5 or 0.6 million cheaper than the likes of Jota. So you can easily do that downgrade. And with that downgrade, guys, you'll also might have to do a downgrade from Sarr to Gray, because Gray is a lot cheaper. He's still a very good player. He's a very good option. So if you're considering him, I think he's a great differential to go for. So, but considering that you might not have the funds for Sarr, who's about, I think about 6 million, you might have to go for Gray. Overall, I still feel it's a pretty decent squad. Is that with not having Trent, again, I'm not biased at all, guys. I'm not a Liverpool supporter. I'm not a Liverpool fan. I'm not a Trent fan, to be very honest. But I still feel it's a little better or it's a little secure when Trent or somebody like a Diaz is there in my defense. Now, the third alternate, guys, is another alternate to this draft, which is a 3-5-2 formation, is a mega one. Now, I think a lot of people might be interested to do this, but I still don't feel it's the best way to do that. You can have the likes of Lukaku and Ronaldo both together in the team, guys. Yes, that is a possibility. I know it's a It's a far-fetched dream for a lot of people, but you can have the likes of Lukaku and Ronaldo in the same team. Of course, you can still retain the likes of Salah as one premium option in midfield. You won't be able to afford Bruno as well because that'll be like a lot of money invested in midfield. But then you can still have Salah, who still has good fixtures, who's a great captaincy option as well. You can retain Rafinha, the likes of Torres as well. I think one option that we haven't really seen in any of our drafts, the ones that I've made, is Adama Traore, guys. I know he's a differential. I know he's probably not the most clinical finisher that you will see. His expected points, his expected goal numbers are a lot higher and he's not scored yet. The fact that he's playing more centrally, right? The fact that he's getting in those spaces, getting those chances, inspires a lot of confidence in terms of the Wolves attack. If you've seen Wolves playing, I think their attack has totally revamped. But they're not that defensive team who probably sits back, hits on the counter with the likes of Adama Traore or the likes of Jimenez feeding in balls to somebody like a Podence, for example. I don't think so Wolves operate in that fashion or that manner anymore. I think Adama Traore is getting a lot of the ball. Yes, he's not really finished any moves yet, but I still feel that, he might create a lot of chances. He might also get a lot of goal scoring opportunities. And for that, I think he's great value at 6 million. You can include a Wolves defender here as well. So I think, as I said earlier in the video, I think Cody is one of the most nailed option. He's a pretty much boring sort of a pick. If you want to take a bit of a risk in the same price bracket, I think Marcel at 4.5 million, I think he's 4.5 million right now. So he could be a decent option. But I think I've gone for the safer pick Cody here. I think one thing I've not really mentioned in most of my drafts is the keepers. I think Sanchez and Steele, they're pretty okay. Of course, you can go for Raya, who is also 4.5 million, who might make more saves. But then Sanchez probably will give you a lot better, clean sheet potential. And if you're okay with that, I still don't see, personally, again, this is totally my personal opinion and I might be wrong. You might have a different opinion altogether, right? And that's absolutely fine. Fantasy as a game, again, there are multiple ways to play it. But I still feel that Sanchez is a pretty decent option to go for. I really don't feel the need to go for a 5 or a 5.5 or even a premium goalkeeper at this moment, right? So I think Sanchez at 4.5 is pretty decent value. Overall, I feel this draft is not that strong, guys. Yes, it has the likes of Lukaku and Ronaldo, but I generally feel, and I think this is a very important takeaway from, if you're watching this video or if you're looking at some other content online or on Twitter, or you might, hear a lot of people repeating the same thing and saying the same thing. I generally feel, rotating these premium options would be the right way to go, and rotating them on the right time during the right week and getting those hauls, I think that's going to be a major key in terms of, having a successful season this year. Of course, with so many options available, you can't go with all the premium options together. So you'll have to pick and choose, and picking the right ones, guys, that's going to mean a lot. That's going to really, really help you get good ranks week on week. So that's why in general, I feel having 3 premiums might be a bit too much. I think it disturbs the overall balance of the team. You can get better options if you go a bit lighter in terms of the attack. I think having the likes of Ronaldo and Lukaku probably at this moment looks a bit too much in terms of the attack. Now the last option, guys, let's say if you want Ronaldo in your team, if you have Salah in your team, if you are letting go of Fernandes, but you want a better balance, you want somebody like a Trent in your team, there's also an option, there's also a way to get Trent. You can easily have the likes of Luka Digne, Trent and Diaz, which is a very strong 3 back, guys. I think they're 3 very good defenders. They have decent potential in terms of clean sheets. Plus with the likes of Digne and Trent, guys, you also get good attacking threat. Now the overall structure kind of still remains the same in terms of the players. You have Rafinha, you have Salah, you now can go for Jota, you can go for Torres, and then Traore as from the earlier draft. Now with Ronaldo, you can easily have Antonio. So you can have Ronaldo and Antonio playing in a 3-5-2 and starting for most weeks. So overall, I feel, guys, the strategy around the premiums will heavily dominate your wildcard team. Again, it's very, very person specific or team specific. But in general, I feel having 2 premiums in your team, that looks a lot more balanced and probably the right way to go ahead. In terms of certain players, I think you might have noticed that there are certain players that are pretty nailed in terms of, whatever structure or whatever kind of combination you're going for in terms of the players. So I think I'm quite sure in terms of my keepers. I think I'm pretty nailed in terms of Sanchez and Steele. Again, there's a lot of talk in terms of, having Melier, but I still feel that that's an additional investment, probably going in a keeper, and I don't feel the need to do that just yet. Now, in terms of some other fixed players, I think you must have seen that I have Duffy and Livramento in my team in most of these drafts that I've made. Of course, you can go for somebody like a Williams who's playing for Norwich. He's a cheaper enabler. He's a cheaper starter also probably. So you can go with him. You can stick to Duffy and Livramento, guys. I don't think so there's a lot of thought to be given here. I think most of the weeks you won't be playing them. Again, you can still rotate them and you can play a 4-back in case if you have midfielders, or if you have forwards who have a tough fixture. But I think in general, having Duffy and Livramento is a pretty strong combination. Now, another couple of midfielders who are pretty nailed in this team is Rafinha and Salah, guys. I think Salah, most of the players generally have Salah, is what I have seen. Of course, his ownership is not 100%, so there are players or there are teams that are going without Salah. But I still feel he's a better option than Bruno Fernandes, especially with Ronaldo coming into the frame, guys. I think Bruno Fernandes as an FPL asset might have reduced impact. I'm not saying it's going to be really bad or he's just going to be pathetic as an FPL asset, but I still feel having Salah is a better play here. You easily can have Rafinha as well. I think he's also a pretty nailed option in all of my drafts. I think he's a set and forget at that value at 6.5. I think he's 6.5 million, something around that range. I think he's a no-brainer, guys, and definitely have him in your team. Another option, and probably the only option in attack, is Antonio, guys, and I think he's pretty nailed in my draft so far. And I think whenever I am also wildcarding, let's say if I am wildcarding this week, I would also definitely go for them. He's a pretty nailed option in the West Ham team. There might be some issues when the Europa League games kind of start, but I think that's pretty manageable, and you might not have to make a lot of transfers and chop and change a lot. But for having the wildcard team in Game Week 4, I think Antonio is also pretty much nailed option. So there are about 7 to probably 8 players nailed in most of my squads, guys. Of course, you can have different players, you can have different combinations. I'm not saying you'll have to start with all these 7 players, because there are a couple of budget enablers here as well, and you can easily choose some other players if you're interested in them. So guys, these were our wildcard drafts for Game Week 4. Let me know what you think about these in the comments below. That'll be all from my side, guys. I hope I was able to give you some clarity in terms of your wildcard team if you're using the chip in Game Week 4. Yes, we did cover strategy in terms of why you should use the chip, why you should not use the chip. Also, we covered some draft variations. If you have some more drafts that you can share, guys, if you feel that they're better drafts, do let me know in the comments below. Do share those drafts with all of us, guys. I think it will be very beneficial for the entire FPL community. Make sure you smash that like button if you enjoyed today's video, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. We'll be back in a couple of days with our transfer tips for Game Week 4, where we talk about what to do with the likes of Lukaku and Ronaldo in a lot more depth. Do look out for that, guys. Till then, keep tinkering with your teams, and I'll see you Insaners next time.